Hello, everyone. We still have a few people logging in now, so we are going to give them a few minutes to get settled, and then we will get underway. Okay, I think we are ready to go. Thank you for joining us today for the launch of Remittance Sub-Committee. On behalf of Singapore FinTech Association, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you here. We appreciate you taking time off your busy schedule to join us today. To begin today's sessions, we are pleased to have Mr. Chia Hock Lai, the President of Singapore FinTech Association, SFA, to deliver the opening remarks. Mr. Chia, to you.
Thanks, Eunice. Mr. Baraka Vali, Chairman, Remittance Association Singapore, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Hock Lai. I'm the founding president of the Singapore FinTech Association. A very good afternoon to all. Welcome to the MOU ceremony between Singapore FinTech Association and the Remittance Association Singapore and the launch of the Remittance Subcommittee. I met Baraka a few times pre-COVID in 2019 to talk about possible collaboration between the two associations. Finally, during COVID-19, we got the chance to finally pin this down. So I think Remittance Association sent an invitation to their members to ask for volunteers to join the subcommittee. And in fact, we intend to launch during the Singapore FinTech Festival last year. Nevertheless, better late than never. Today, we are ready to launch. And what is interesting is that all the subcommittee members of the Remittance Subcommittee are both members in SFA and RAS. Since I started my FinTech journey 5 years ago, I always hear the thing, one day, remittance will be as low cost as international cost. And for the later international cost, we know has been very low cost because of disruption caused by technology, whereby the availability of low cost broadband has lowered down the cost of international costs significantly. Similarly, I think we are looking forward for the same for remittance. Nowadays, we see a lot of news on central bank digital currencies, distributed ledger technology. So I think the day might not be too far away. But of course, one thing is, unlike international costs, remittance is a service that requires things like AML and KYC. But that is also an area whereby regulatory technology can help. So the next point I want to cover is really that one of the key remit about this collaboration is how the combined partnership between both associations can help traditional remittance companies to digitalize so that they remain relevant and competitive. And the other remit is really by combining forces, leveraging on respective strength of each other, we can be a stronger voice for advocacy work. Therefore, I look forward to the collaboration with RRS. And thank you. Over to you, Eunice.
Thank you, Mr. Chia. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Barakat Ali, the Chairman of Remittance Association Singapore, RAS, to deliver a speech. Mr. Barakat, over to you.
Thank you, Eunice. A very good afternoon. Mr. Chia Hock Lai, President of the SFA, Mr. Ho Chi Wai, also the Chairperson of the Remittance Sub-Committee, and others as well. A very good afternoon to you. And I thank you. I think Mr. Chia Hock Lai has covered his speech, and most of his speech has covered what we had intended for the subcommittee. I think it's very important. I think as we are seeing the Payment Services Act come into play, it means that the government's push to digitalize and the access to technology, which has become simpler and relatively affordable to many, has opened a world of avenues. That is why the Remittance Association was formed back in April 2014 to provide support for an industry facing structural change from challenges such as digitalization and greater regulation. So I think that this collaboration is very, very essential and very, very important. For the past few years, the committee has been working together with to provide balance, because we have a lot of members who are traditional players, all right, brick and mortar companies who have been affected a lot by digitalization, all right, and also they are finding difficulties in adopting digital technology, and they have not seen the effects or the results that digital technology can be brought. And that is why the committee has decided that we need to work with the experts in the fintech industry, which is the SFA. The emerging fintech players raised the bar in the remittance sector. With the growth of mobile phone technology, startups are hoping to enter the cross-border payments industry. Many fintech startups and giant companies such as Google Pay, Alipay, and others have already gotten their license. With such a small market in Singapore, a lot of existing licenses have to step up to compete as the consumers become more tech savvy. So all of us know the Payment Services Act has replaced the MCRB Act. This has been one of the most significant indication that businesses in Singapore will have to act to digitalize their business to keep pace with the technology. The PS Act has also seen MAS gaining more regulatory and supervisory powers on a range of digital products and services. The change is happening in almost all industries, as you can see. The cross-border industry has to act and act fast to keep up with the trend and the competition. The committee of the RAS have been working to equip members with the importance of, firstly, adopting technology, secondly, providing digital platforms to facilitate cross-border payments, and thirdly, of course, ensuring that AML CFT framework remains always a top priority and relevant to the current times. The partnership with SFA is a key milestone, and we hope that the subcommittee is mutually beneficial to both the members from both the association. I would like to thank the SFA, the president, Mr. Chai Hock Lai, and Mr. Ho Chi Wai, and the other subcommittee members who have devoted their time to make this subcommittee a reality. Thank you very much. And over to you, Eunice.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barakat. So we now come to the signing of Memorandum of Understanding between Singapore FinTech Associations and Remittance Association Singapore. So now, can I request both of you to hold up the signed MOU for a few seconds so that we can do a screenshot of this special moment? Give Mr. Jia hold for a while.
You.
Okay. Okay. Okay, it is good. Thank you so much. Moving on right along, we would like to introduce the members of the newly formed Remittance Subcommittee. Please join me in welcoming the co-chairmen of Remittance Subcommittee. They are Mr. Ho Chi Wai from NIAM, Mr. Krishna R. Subramaniam from Brisbane. There are also 7 members from the Remittance Subcommittee. They are Mr. Alvin Saw from Transwap, Mr. K. Premanan from Western Union, Ms. Sylvia Kaur from TUNS, Mr. Chang Ching Yuan from Amber Transfers, Mr. Lim Ming Wang from Kans Remit, Mr. Samir Malik from Sunlit Money Changer, and Ms. Anjana Srinivasan from SingX. And today we are pleased to have them here as a panelist for today's discussions. Without further ado, let's get started with the panel discussions. I'm going to hand the floor over to Ming Wang, who is going to moderate the panel discussions. Ming Wang, it's all yours.
Thanks for the introduction, Eunice. And also thank you to all the our esteemed panel members who are experts in the field to share your insights on the industry. I think in the interest of time for the audience to know, I'll be directing questions at specific panel members. And then towards the end, if we do have a bit of extra time, we'll probably take 1 or 2 questions from the Q&A panel. So feel free to pop your questions into that Q&A panel. So without further ado, I'd like to begin perhaps with a bit more of a macro view type question. For this, I'd like to direct it towards, I think we'll probably begin with Elvin from Transwap. What are some of the top trends that you see in the remittance industry, which I suppose we should all be cognizant of currently?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody. So right now with growing customers' demands, right, remittance done in conventional ways in the past will slowly evolve towards not only just collections and payments made possibly globally, but also with artificial intelligence and machine learning, which will also capitalize on the data, which is the most valuable resource of any financial institute. So data such as current payment methods, patterns, behaviors can also be extrapolated towards future activities and can also be useful to customize future solutions, which will help to improve on the user experience, especially for corporate clients, with this objective of optimizing inflow and outflow of funds with minimal FX risk, and also to reduce unnecessary FX exposure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Elvin, for that. Following this, I'd like to turn it towards the attention towards Qing Yuan from Ample Transfers. So earlier, Elvin was just saying how you can use leverage data to improve the customer experience and I guess reduce risk. Is that a main trend that you're observing as well, Qing Yuan, or do you have alternative views to that?
All right, hi everybody. Thank you, Ming Wang. So actually, slightly different. I have a little bit different from what Elvin thinks, but I do think that one key trend in the industry would be the increase of customer-facing online portals, both on the web and through mobile applications. So the majority of remittance companies right now with physical outlets, I'm pretty sure they've gotten inquiries for online remittance at some point by now. But I think the pandemic that happened last year has definitely accelerated that demand, right? So we're not gonna see customers flocking onto the portals immediately. Sentiments are not gonna change overnight, right? But as the country is pushing towards being a more technology-driven and a more cashless society, I think these portals should not be overlooked in what might soon be the new norm of the future. Some companies are also having issues with cash handling operations, over the counter. So I believe the appeal of receiving payments digitally through these portals would also help. Will also help a little bit. And by bringing more customers onto these portals, we're looking to assist the unbanked population of the customers. Going hand in hand with all these portals will definitely be some fintech services and products. For example, maybe the payment solution providers for settlement, and in particular eKYC, which would actually allow the onboarding process to be done fully digitally, without having the customer ever being present, something like a non-face-to-face transaction, but at the same time also being compliant to relevant guidelines, which is very important in the current age. Right. So keeping in mind, there are also some grants out there right now, like the DAG, I think the Digital Acceleration Grant by the MES, to co-fund some of these projects. I do think that there will be an upwards trend of such adoption of such portals and services within the industry in the coming year or so. Yeah.
Ching Yang, if I can just follow up on your point. So, I mean, you're saying the main trend that you observe is the digitalization. People starting to use digital apps or portals to be able to access and have their remittance solutions provided. One alternative view that's come up before was that, the customer behavior, particularly, let's say, a lot of, say, migrant workers, right? Their behavior is still going to a physical shop. It's part of their weekend process. After they've had some food, they go to a physical shop. Most of them don't have, I guess, sophisticated cards, for example, even, right? They might even just have an ATM card. So when you talk about the digital portal being the next trend, are we saying that it's only specific to certain consumers and not inclusive of the large group of, say, I guess, migrant workers who use remittances on a daily basis?
So to address your point on things about migrant workers having ATM cards, there is actually a demand for wallet users, actually, not just particularly ATM cards. So, the wallet providers are actually able to, for example, like at your convenience stores, things like that, your 7-Elevens, top up their wallets and things like that. So one way of actually tapping onto that market is actually also incorporating the different wallets in, so in that way, providing a full solution for them. But I mean, it's hard to debate whether they're still going to enjoy going down to the physical stores on their weekends and things like that. But that's something that we all have to work towards, as a whole. Even as the country, the government is actually pushing for more, like, for example, more employers to actually pay them digitally instead of in cash and things like that. So that would actually push, I do think that it will actually push a little bit more onto the digital platforms.
Okay, that's a fair point, the last one. If the employers are pushing it onto digital wallets, then the employees would be, I guess, more willing to adopt it for their remittances as well.
Definitely.
Interesting view. And for this question, I'd also like to, I suppose, invite Prem from Western Union to share a little bit about some of the trends that you have been observing on your side.
Yeah, a very good afternoon to everyone. And thanks. For us, before we start on the trend, maybe I can share a bit of the local trend and across Southeast Asia, what's the trend which we are seeing, because me managing a number of countries in Southeast Asia, it's different trends are emerging. For Singapore, mainly, I think, yes, I agree, digitalization has taken over. Many of us are digitalizing and moving towards that. But the customer adoption is still at a very low. We have numbers to back that, and we have been in the market. But it's still like what the earlier person mentioned. Customers don't feel still very comfortable to go to a location to do it online through a web portal or through a mobile. They still prefer to go to a location. We have spoken to them and said that it's much easier and cost efficient, because there's almost 25% difference in fee if they are doing it from the location or they are doing online and mobile. So I think even after doing that, they still prefer to go to the location. Mainly customers' feedback is saying that if anything goes wrong, they want to go and see a person. They are not comfortable in speaking English, and they do not want to call a hotline and wait for days to get a reply. And some of them do not even have an email. So I believe that the trend, while we are investing a lot to go digitalization, I think it's also need to take the customer feedback and maybe come up with the app in their native language, provide support centers in their native language, would maybe increase the digital penetration among them. The other trend which we are looking at is the profitability of each transaction. As the years go by, the profitability has gone down significantly. Many of the companies are offering the services free for online portals, just charging a base FX, which is affecting, because if you consider anyone who's paying out in the receive country, they have to pay out a fee for settlement. And this fee is almost equivalent for anyone. So when they are giving it free on the send side, it takes a big effort. After some time, nobody can continue giving it at a free or a low fee. So they have to bring on a fee, and then the customer movement shifts, So these are the trends which we are moving. So while customers tend to go once any company offer it as a free online portal, they move there, but it's not a permanent move. Once that offer's finished, they come back to where they were doing it previously. So this is the trend which we are losing. So although we lost some customers, we always recover the customers back. So I think these are the trends in terms of sending remittance across the board. Thanks.
I see. Prab, actually, I just want to follow up on your point there. So for you, I guess you're more inclined to say that ultimately, especially in the emerging markets, I guess the consumers are still more interested in still just walking in and doing that physical, providing a physical instruction. So are you suggesting that from your perspective, the traditional remittance guys have less of a reason to consider digitalization?
Not specifically. I think they need to first take into consideration which customer segment they are targeting. Are they targeting the white collars or the semi-white collars, or they are targeting the blue collar workers? So based on the target segment, then they need to align their products. For example, since I manage China and Korea, maybe I can give you an example in Korea. In Korea, remittance is almost 100% digital. Even if there are locations, you go into the location, you can do your KYC and register, but the transaction has to be done through an app. So that drives even the blue collars to use that app to do the transaction. In China today, again, you have to go into a banks. Only banks are allowed to do remittance from China. So they have the bank app. You have to register in the bank as in person. Once the KYC is done, then from your next transaction onwards, you can use the bank portals to do the transaction. So it depends on how the country's policies are. In Singapore, it's more like still people tend to go to the location. We are not forcing them to take on the digital thing. But like Korea, what I mentioned, there's no way a person can go into a remittance location to send money. So they are adapting to the apps.
Okay, thanks for that, Prem.
Yeah.
So I'd like to then just shift to my next question, right? I think it's a big reason of why all of us are gathered here today and why the committee is being formed. I mean, the subcommittee is in part to actually seek deeper collaboration between traditional remittance providers and technology companies. So this nicely segues from what we were just talking about. I mean, how do you see this goal, I suppose, being achieved? And if you could provide, I guess, use cases to illustrate, it would help as well. Maybe Sylvia from Tunes would be able to touch on this point.
All right. I think what we can do over here as a subcommittee is that we are able to link, say, traditional companies as well as the technology providers to help the traditional companies transform and go digital if that is the aim. So for example, if you need things like eKYC, you need to learn about the customer experience. How is it going to change, to transform, to improve? How your app is going to cater to different languages. So things like this, a lot of us in the subcom have gone through that change before, and we also do know players that are specialized in certain segments, say for eKYC, right? So that will be where I think we'll be able to provide some inputs, some feedback on our experience, and also to link up with the right folks to help the remittance industry in general.
I see. Okay, I see that. I think from based on your answer, I would like to hear also just from conversations with Chiwai from NEOM. I think he's got some thoughts on this as well. Chiwai, would you be able to address this question?
Certainly. I would see that this subcommittee is definitely a child of both SFA and RAS. And the best part is that we amalgamate the finest thought leaders, and we are all practitioners in RAS in terms of remittance and cross-border. And you look at it marrying with not just the best technology innovators in SFA, but also its relationship with other associations like NTUC. There's certainly a lot of synergies that we can derive between the two associations. And specific to this question, I may touch upon this 4 terms of reference that we have indicated as our mission focus areas. The number 1 is on engagement with regulators. The second is engagement with industry. Third is to nurture the development of the ecosystem. And the 4th is the talent development. So if you look at the latter 3, engagement with industry, to what Silva is saying is really about how can we harness the best of breed and what SFA members can provide in their innovations and their solutions, be it in the RegTech, and it may not be very sophisticated technologies. What we heard from some of our members in RAS is that they actually don't mind still looking at over-the-counter service, but certainly that doesn't mean that they cannot do digital transformation. They can start simple with looking at how perhaps they can transform from using an Excel spreadsheet to maintain their customer database to leveraging on the CRM. That is in itself is also a form of digital transformation. Of course, there are different levels of maturities. Some may be more advanced, and that's where you look at how banking as a service and how do you do even payments to e-wallets instead of lending to a cash pickup point or to a bank account. To cover the other 2, nurturing of development of ecosystem, that's where I think our expertise and thought leadership can come in to share with SFA members on what's trending in remittance, just like what we are doing now, and also perhaps having the partnerships with associations like ABS to see how we can work better with banks to get their support. On the talent development front, upskilling of employees in this industry is something that I'm keen to work with the members to see how we can tap onto the NTUC fair price, how the different government grants can be applied. And not just about the existing employees, but also we want to ensure that our future talents, those from the Institute of Higher Learnings, are attracted to this industry and come in with the ideas to contribute and level up the whole industry.
Okay. I'm just gonna take just to follow up on that point that you and Sylvia were sharing, and obviously Chiwai, you did touch again on the topic of, I guess, digitalization of a rather traditional industry. I have a question actually from the floor, from Jonathan Chua, who actually gave an example of, he said, TNG in Hong Kong managed to have, I guess, adoption with I guess, migrant worker groups. For example, workers from the Philippines and from Indonesia. Do you observe that there's a difference, or could you explain why there might be a difference in that sort of adoption by, I guess, our migrant groups to digital solutions in, say, Hong Kong versus what's happening in Singapore?
Yeah, I can start first. I suppose it's not the case where the situation is that bad in Singapore. And certainly COVID has helped to catalyze the move towards digital. But as Prem has alluded, we need to do a lot more in the way we develop our customer experience and also in customer support to make it friendlier and more intuitive for the migrant workers to sign up. Part of the reason why they still prefer approaching the shops and being in the queue for an hour to do their remittance service is also the fact that they can interact with their friends and chit-chatting while in the queue. That aspect of the social element, I don't think is something we can replicate. But certainly, I would advocate the fact that if you can spend less time on the transactional aspect and more time doing your social, that's something that I do think they appreciate better. So how to make it simple, easy, so that they can spend more time interacting with their friends.
I see. Thanks for that, GY. I think, okay, I'm just gonna address the third question that we have actually lined up. You know, what more, which also follows up very nicely from what we're talking about, you know, what more can we, I guess as a committee or community do to enhance, I guess, adoption of, you know, remittance services, particularly, I guess, technology-powered remittance services by SMEs who are facing the most challenges with traditional banking. For this question, I would like to invite Krishna from Brookbond to address it first.
Thanks, Ming. At the outset, I'll probably take a moment to thank the FinTech Association and RAS for the opportunity of all of us coming together and providing this forum to make a difference. I think that is quite exemplary. To the question, Ming, I think I'll go back to a couple of points that we heard earlier in terms of trends from Chin Yuan and Premanand, where the digital adoption trends has not been as exciting as it could have been, and Chu Wai's interesting explanation about people wanting to still stand in lines and exchange social messages. I think from an SME context, the digital adoption trend has not been as equally exciting either. But I think from an SMEs are facing three challenges. One is the enormous time it takes for completion of the KYC. That's one. Secondly, they still want to have the personal touch. They don't want to get on a call, stay for a length of time, punch buttons, and wait for a response. And thirdly is cost of transaction, going way back to what Hoklai mentioned at the top of kicking off this forum in terms of international calling versus cost of transactions. These three involve three different stakeholders, and I think we can play a key role in this. First aspect is the KYC, and that is going to, while it has, within Singapore, we all of course have the corporate access to corporate KYC and within SME, Corpass, etc. Mm-hmm. But internationally, I think the effort will involve a much broader participation through Wolfsburg Group and FATF and the US FinCEN, et cetera, to come together to have a sort of a central digital repository linking all of these together. And there are vendors who are playing this role to digitize and extract some of the company registry information for us to be able to adopt that. And I think the regulators have not stepped in to bless many of those initiatives, and it's a hard grind for these providers. So I do see that some of them are going to each of these regulators and trying to get some sort of a letter to bless adoption of such a eKYC across borders. So that is a key one, which I think we in the association can press. The second is, of course, continuing to provide lower cost of transactions. Here, I see a couple of trends. As Ming, you rightly said, SMEs are facing challenges in operating traditional banking challenges and simply having access to them. What we collectively have made it easy is to provide them access to wallets. Now, Singapore, I think, has done a terrific job as far as within Singapore transactions is concerned by launching, I think, end of last year, the direct fast and pay now access. I think all 23 of the fast network and the 9 pay now banks working together with the ABS and the direct fast working group, have made e-wallets to bank accounts transfer available to non-banking financial institutions such as us. So that's a terrific news for SMEs. But then we need something very similar to have non-banking channels operated at a much lower cost. And some of the network providers are already experimenting with providing alternate transfer features from e-wallets to e-wallets by partnering with some of the large global fintech players. And very soon you will find that that channel could also open up to non-banking FIs such as ourselves. So we can switch from a very SWIFT-based service to non-banking networks such as this. And that's probably another key stakeholder who can play a part. And finally, I think we in the industry need to continue to engage with forums such as the SME CFO network, etc., in showcasing what we can do, probably inviting some of them to this forum, maybe next time we meet, and probably have a healthy interaction and see if our directions could converge better.
Thank you for that, Krishna. I think on this point as well, Chiwai, if you could, I guess, weigh in based on your NUMS having its experience with both back-end and front-end sort of clientele. Maybe you could weigh in on this point as well. How can we help, I guess, SMEs with adoption of this new movement, you would say, in the remittance space to help them with the challenges that they're facing with traditional banks?
Sure. Looking at the Singapore landscape, SME plays a very critical role in our economy. 99.5% of our enterprises are SMEs. That's 280,000 SMEs in Singapore. But even before we talk about helping them in their cross-border payments, many of them essentially are kind of not knowing the fact that when you go international, they are trying to scratch ahead to figure out what are the best providers that can support them in making their cross-border payments. And oftentimes, and maybe natural for them to think that the banks are the only organizations that can support them. Maybe that's the part where the educational piece, and through this committee, we want to also elevate the presence of remittance companies here, fintech companies who can do their role of supporting them in cross-border as good, if not better, than what the banks are doing. I think that's essential. Through our experience, it's indeed some were surprised that we are licensed and we could offer innovative way and trusted and cost-efficient ways to do cross-border payments. And the educational piece does take a lot of time to go through, and you need to sit with them, you need to present to them, need to handhold them. But once they recognize the benefits of working with remittance companies like us, they will stick because they do see the benefits of using our service over what the banks and the traditional way of cross-border payments can provide. So the educational part and the awareness part would be something that I think we should work hard to ensure more SMEs are aware of our presence.
Thank you. Alvin, maybe I'd like to invite you to address this same question as well, because you've had your time with traditional remittance with CYS in the past before joining Transwap. So it'd be interesting to get your view on this question on what can be done to, I guess, encourage or support SMEs with this with the adoption of a technologically powered remittance solution.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in contrast between in CYS, which is a traditional brick and mortar remittance firm, and that of Transwap, basically, onboarding of customers are actually still quite similar. It's just that for most brick and mortar companies, okay, they will actually go through the proper the paperwork, signing of forms. Whereas for Transwap, we actually go through eKYC. It's more seamless, right? Okay, because it's all on a click of a button that they can actually sign an account with us, and also for them, they will also get to use the platform to actually to book deals. But basically, a lot of SMEs, in Singapore are still more of a traditional. So, we actually, our sales team actually help them along the way to assist them in using our platform and our services. Yeah.
If I may add, I think the government is also doing a fair amount of work to ease some of the onboarding journey, like with all the developments with the court pass, having a MyInfo for business. I think those are very positive and proactive initiative that will help smoothen the onboarding journey. And at least that should address one of the bigger hurdle when SMEs tries to sign up for our services.
I see. Okay. That's helpful. I'm just going to go to our fourth question now, which is a bit of I guess it's a bit more cutting edge, a little bit different. With the advent of cryptocurrencies, including stable coins, like say the USDC, which is essentially a token that's pegged 1-to-1 to a fiat currency like the US dollar. Do you foresee that there will be an impact, I suppose, on the evolution of the remittance industry, and what sort of impact do you see will happen? I think on this topic, probably it will still be Krishna and Chiwa, I think, who are best suited to answer this. So maybe Krishna, if you can address it first. Yeah.
Sure, Ming, thank you. Well, I think to set it in context, just for size comparison, right? So remittance is really over the next few years. I mean, I'm saying over the next 1 or 2, 3 years, will be a $20 billion market size, which is growing at about 13 or 14%, give or take. And in today, it's still about 13 billion. In comparison, the crypto market size, by all estimates, is less than $1 billion. I mean, 700 million or so. It depends on who you talk to. So it hogs at the moment a disproportionate, presence online and in print. But what makes it interesting, an interesting distraction, if I might add, is that it's growing at 30% every year. And over the next, in a similar time frame, maybe 8 or 9 year time frame, it will be significant. Not as much as the remittance, but it will be about $4 to $5 billion business. Now, what makes it important is it has a social impact. The adoption to digital has a social impact, and a lot of us may not realize this. Many of the users of crypto would be those who currently do not have a fixed address. They would be migrant workers. 1/7 of the global population does not have a verifiable address today. And secondly is they have access to what is called what we know as a smartphone. Mm-hmm. So the matching of digital to smartphone and adoption by such a large unbanked section of our population is going to make it extremely attractive, and it would be imperative for remittance businesses such as ourselves to address it both from an individual consumer payment context, but also interestingly from an SME context, because many of the SMEs, as I already mentioned, have access to e-wallets. And these individuals will also have access to e-wallets, even if not traditional bank accounts. And e-wallet to e-wallet transactions are going to drive much of this growth. And therefore, this is I'm sure the adoption will pick up, and we will all play a key part. And Singapore, the regulatory environment here is extremely conducive, and seeks to keep us at the cutting edge of this development. And many of us have seen the news about digital assets exchange and things like that. All of it is welcome, and we will see the regulatory support in being enhanced. For instance, you might, as I talked about, you don't have an address proof for people who own assets, who own digital assets, right? That's a key aspect of how you transact, travel rule, etc., for identifying who is the originator and receiver. A key aspect is to enhance the regulatory framework. If you look at where the mobile phones are situated in the nights, that becomes their address pretty much. So he's a migrant worker. So you need a regulatory enhancement to recognize those as verifiable address proof. So things of that nature, innovations of that nature will drive this sort of adoption and the technology associated with it as well.
Okay, that's very insightful. Chiu, I understand that you also have views on this particular topic. Would you like to weigh in?
If I put it in the context of cross-border payments or remittance, I don't think that this is something that the usage of cryptocurrency for cross-border payments or remittance is anything new. That has been around easily for like 3 to 4 years. But in my opinion, I don't think it would be earth-shaking. Neither would it have a significant implication to the industry, at least not for the short term. If anything, it could be easily 5 to 10 years before we see this going mainstream. In the early years, people have been experimenting with more public crypto like Bitcoin to do cross-border, but obviously those has risk because the value of asset fluctuate so significantly and so volatile. You never know that by the time the recipient receive it, albeit it may be split second, it may be half the value of what the sender intended to send. There are companies who try and innovate, come out with their own digital assets, treat that as the crypto. But then I also cautious that do you trust them? You never know that maybe the asset in flight, the company will have gone kaput, and the recipient will not have any meaning receiving those digital assets. But lately, there are those crypto assets that are backed by stable coins. You mentioned the USDC. There are also the likes of Diem, Libra. And not to also forget that the central banks are experimenting with digital currencies, the central bank digital currencies. I personally think that that is a better bet. But even for that to be mainstream, it's easy for you to do a bilateral experimentation between two countries. But imagine if you want to get all the countries to come together, agree on the standard, agree on how you're going to exchange. After all, each country, unless everyone follows the same standard, each country will have their own variant of a digital currency. Then how do you do the exchange between the two digital currencies? So I do think that there are many kind of roadblocks that are ahead. There are many uncertain areas that the central banks will continue to experiment. And for the private sector, those that are using stable coins, a lot are based on USD. Would that be moving forward the dominant currency of the world? Certainly, China is also trying to influence and spearheading their initiative based on the digital RMB. So again, how do we get the two to align and interoperate? And for you to really be truly mainstream, you still need the individual customers. How, after I receive the money, how can I seamlessly use it to buy my goods from the grocery does the mom and pop shop accept digital currency? If not, I will still have to end up with the additional hurdle of trying to convert the digital currency to fiat before you can use it in the streets. So that's another hurdle. So unless you really have seamless and ubiquitous usage across, which I think it will, but it will certainly take a long time. For now, I don't think, I think it's all good experimentation. Whether it's the regulators, whether it's the private sector, they will continue to innovate, but it will take some time before we see it mainstream.
Okay, thanks. I mean,
just to add to what
Yep.
Chiwa just mentioned, I entirely agree that which is why I initially said in context the relative sizes of the markets we should be cognizant of, and Chiwa makes a valid point.
Mm-hmm.
So to the context of the supermarket acceptance of the settlement in digital currency. I think what we will see, there's a lot of work going on even among the payment network players, that you will see announcements coming over the next several weeks and months. There are alternate settlement schemes that are being developed from issuers to acquirers. So a settlement system entirely based on digital issuing and digital acquiring is what we will increasingly see. Credible ones, essentially at the center of which is another thing that TY mentioned, which is security. A lot of digital assets are operated and owned through private keys. If you lose the private keys, you no longer have ownership of the digital asset. And many companies are trying to crack that problem of offering safe deposits online, of hosting private keys securely. And those same companies will be the heart of these alternate settlement systems. So I think there's a lot of interesting announcements that we will all get to hear and understand and probably leverage off over the coming months is what
I think from a subcommittee perspective, we would certainly like to expose our members to help them appreciate the cryptocurrencies and digital assets. They can also have in mind what is the implication of them. We do need to recognize, again, we have a spectrum of companies in the level of maturity where they are. Some may still want to prefer to have their own physical outlet. Crypto is kind of far from me. Some may be more advanced at in digital remittance, and maybe those can start embracing some of the more established stable coins. So it's really about creating awareness, letting them know what is trending in the industry, so that they can all make an informed decision. And digital asset is one topic. I'm sure in this community we would like to also tap onto the wealth of SFA members and the various expertise they have to bring in all the ragtags, the innovation and green sustainability. You never know that some of this would be relevant to our members.
Actually, so I just want to go back just quickly on what Krishna was sharing as well, because it sounds like, I guess, Krishna, you are quite bullish on the future of the adoption of, I guess, potentially some form of digital currency, right? And again, that definition is quite broad, because whether you're a stable coin or it's what is issued by the central bank of China is not exactly a stable coin per se. It's their own version of a digital currency, but it's not necessarily a cryptocurrency per se. But because of your background, I understand you're very deep rooted in your past life, I guess, in the compliance side of things as well.
Yep.
What are your thoughts there? Because that's the question people always say. They said, okay, it's wonderful to adopt this new innovation, but is it too opaque to adopt it from AML compliance management perspective? I don't delve too much into it because that might be more suitable for a compliance subcommittee discussion, but just if you could touch briefly on that before I move to the next question. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you make a valid point, and that's the crux of the challenge. How do you identify who's sending, etc.? But you would initially find that technology infrastructure for the for the first time perhaps leads the number of adopters or number of users or the volume of transactions. So you will find that technology is available and it's a matter of people jumping onto it, which is why the size is so small today, and it will take 8-9 years for it to reach even 1/4 of current remittance size. To your specific point about the compliance aspect, I think some of the big players who already know the users on their platforms will be early drivers of volume. One example I can give is the well-known Libra, right? So Facebook is in conversation with many of these network players mainly because of that, because they have some 2 billion users who they know exactly who they are. So that's a start. Similarly, there will be other players who also know and are aware of who their users are and will come onto these platforms. And you will slowly begin to see that these early adopters, technology savvy users of other online devices and platforms will switch on onto this very quickly, because what you will find that it costs almost nothing to go from point A to point B with the digital assets you own, and that will become a crucial factor, especially if on the fiat side the costs are not falling fast enough.
Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you, Krishna. I now I'd like to open a question to actually Sylvia, and this is a question that has come from the floor. It says, right now, as the barrier of entry to set up an account with remittance providers is so simple and convenient, and the rates and fees are very transparent for everyone to see, what are your thoughts or comments on customer retention? I suppose what would then differentiate, right? Because if we can ease onboarding and fees are now very, very transparent for people to do comparisons, what then would make, I guess, a good service provider in the space?
I mean, it's not just about remittance, but for all, say, product services that we all procure and consume, we always think about not just the cost, as well as the quality of service, time, cost, quality, right? So since price is transparent, users are free to compare now, then it's down to, say, quality as well as the speed. So with digitalization, ability to send to different payment types and the fintechs coming up, it can be in real time. So then what about quality and other methods to retain them? So in terms of, say, quality, it's not just about the speed, but also the customer experience. In case of issues, who do they approach? Do they get an answer? Do they get a clear feedback in terms of, say, escalation? So say, take an example like Myanmar now. We all know the situation in Myanmar. Perhaps some of the remittance are not being able to process. Maybe some of them still have their status stuck, being ambiguous stage. Right, so then in those cases, how do you address the customer's concern actively? Is their money still with you? Do you want to refund them? And to find a process to work out with the customer. And I think someone mentioned earlier on that, the transit. Why do some customers still prefer to go to the shops? So apart from also the social interactions with their peers, they also like it that there is a physical contact where they can go to. So while you see some companies have their apps, they also have offices where they can address all of these concerns and the challenges that people face when they have an issue. So I think that contributes to the quality part, the customer experience, the quality, how do you address their concerns. Then you also have the part where how do you actively keep them transacting. I think loyalty program may help over here. So if you look at Grab, they have multiple services. So what they do is every time you spend, you're able to get certain reward points, you can get rebates, and that you can use those to redeem for your next transactions, perhaps. Of course, there's a cost associated with loyalty programs, but the same for the company. The moment you lose a customer, there is a cost as well.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, so I would also like to add on about the customer experience portion. So from experience, what most customers go through is even though we have like a physical location and things like that, a lot of the updates and transactional status aren't readily available for these customers. So one way that we can actually look to improve with the use of digitalization services like that is to actually provide updates and things like that, for the customer to be aware of the journey of their funds and things like that. That's actually, I find, a very simple thing to actually incorporate. It's something that we as a user, as a consumer, you want to know, you want to be updated, and instead of only being able to get answers when escalation arises, when there's an issue. I think that is something that is also very important in an age where everybody is window shopping. Like the question said, everybody's fees and rates are also competitive, right? So yeah, so that's something that we all can look to actually explore.
If I may also add on to that, I think it's also where these days you'll see a lot of companies when they first started as providing a sole service, for example, like remittance. Many of them are also broadening the service offerings and just like Instagram transforming to become a neobank, when we can value add aside from just loyalty and rewards, other relevant financial services that customer may want, rather than having the customer just use our app once or twice for their cross-border payments. If we can offer other relevant financial services to them, they become more sticky, and they will view you more holistically as a financial service provider rather than just a remittance provider.
I see. Okay. What about sorry, Prem, being from Western Union and your exposure in multiple markets, like you said, those are more tech savvy and those that aren't. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, what differentiates, I guess, a good solution provider if we are saying that prices isn't the way to go anymore?
Yeah, taking into that consideration, pricing is no longer the key differentiator, because in certain markets, multiple providers are at zero fee and they charge just from the FX. What we are looking at is today to enable large wallets or other kind of apps which are already in the market providing other services to the customer. So let it be today with those apps in Indonesia, they are using it for their transport, practically for many other things. We enable them with our services through a white label partnership. So sometimes it's not branded and they can choose which kind of service they want. Is it direct to bank account and so on. So by enabling that, then their customer base is getting the additional facility of remittance also included to them. And the purpose of these apps is no longer just a remittance. Rather than us launching in these countries, it becomes a value add to their app. So if you look at it, that tends to be a bit more helpful with the customers. There's multiple purpose for the app rather than just a remittance app. So the take-up rate is higher, and also the pricing can be more competitive as well.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very insightful. Okay, so then I think now looking at the floor, there's a particular question that I think would be quite interesting for everyone here is to understand. I think it's a question from Matthew Yap. Let me just take a look at that pop up. Yeah, so the question from Matthew here is, a large part of the panel so far has been about digital adoption on the consumer and corporate end, and with regards to financial inclusion and the marriage of tech and fintech in this subcommittee, and how it can improve the experience of older SMEs and organizations. His question now is, I'm wondering what else could be done to help member associations. Could the SFA and RAS committee share some of the concerns and considerations for their plans or roadmap? I think for this, probably, Krishna, with your position, would you be able to take this?
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Ming. It's a great question. We are in the early days of this subcommittee, and we we have set out broad goals and roadmap for us. I think and the details will of course be, fleshed out and agreed with both sides of the association of this forum. Broadly speaking, I think what we want to, in addition to digital adoption, as you've correctly said, we would also want to focus on other things, a couple of other matters. One is, as Chiwai mentioned, training. I think is a key focus area for us, competency and training. And rolled into that is, of course, is also communication. How do we communicate and engage allied associations such as the SME forums, CFO forum of SMEs in a way that is beneficial to them and in a way that we can also benefit from serving their needs. So I think communication and training becomes an important aspect. And thirdly, perhaps, if I might add, would be use of technology and other players, industry players, including stakeholders, including even regulators and other network partners, to encourage adoption of platforms, systems that shift cost points lower for SMEs. I think those would be in my three initial thoughts on this one, Matthew.
Okay, that is very helpful. I'm just mindful of the time. Perhaps we can address one last question. I think in view of this, Eunice, there is a question here that goes: is there still a need for cash collection of currencies through an outlet or say a vending machine? Person who asked is anonymous. I think probably Ching Yuan, if it's something that you can take this up.
Yep. So with regards to cash collection, I mean, there's no way we're going to avoid everything altogether. There's still going to be the customers who prefer to come down and actually hand cash over because maybe they are being paid in cash or they receive cash. So there's definitely not going to be a total wipe of like no more cash collections. But it's also important to understand that we are able to tap on all the new, like what Chiwai said. Apart from banks, there are also other settlement payment providers and things like that for us to move the volume on to digitally, right? So at the same time, we try to reduce the cash collection because cash collection for remittance companies actually have a cost to it, right? So the idea is always to reduce the cost, but of course it is not possible to actually totally negate the cash collection altogether. And things like a vending machine, from experience, it actually costs more than to actually have the staff there to actually do the transactions. So from my point of view, a vending machine is kind of like a big no right now. But of course, we would try with the adoption of more portals and online services to actually shift some of the volume over onto the digital side of things.
I see. Okay. I personally have many burning questions, but again, I'm being flagged over by our MC and host here about the time. So thank you so much.
So if I may also add some
ahead.
remarks, just to round out this. I guess as all of you can see, we have a very diverse members in our committee, each of them representing different focus area, and certainly we want to bring a lot more value add to our members. And as part of our outreach, you would hear from us very soon that we will also be getting inputs from each and every one of you, whether it's from SFA side, whether it's RAS side, what are your wish lists? So while we do have some idea, like RegTech has always been flagged out as one of the important agenda to cover. But to Matthew's point, it's not just all about technology. So we are very happy and eager to hear from the association members what you want. So we'll be sending out a survey very shortly to poll and for you to share your requests so that we can look at the list, prioritize, and be able to address some of those points that you wish to be covered.
Okay, thanks for that, Chiwai. So Eunice, I'll hand it back over to you for the rest of the agenda. And thanks again to the wonderful, I guess, our experts on our panel for sharing your thoughts. There are some questions from the floor as well. You know, actually, I want to address at some point, but I'm the moderator today, so you know, feel free to drop us a question or email any one of us directly. Eunice, the floor is yours.
Thank you, panelists, for the great discussions. And thanks again to everyone. That ends our session for today. Thanks again for joining us. And I wish you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.